Have you ever looked at a child in awe of how they have this keen sense of curiosity and adventure, the sponginess of their minds and ability to be flexible in their thinking with just a little bit of skepticism and humility? That's something that comes so naturally to them. It's almost hard to believe at one time we were just like them in our youth. And I often ask the question, what happened? Well, as we matured into adulthood, we lost that sense of curiosity and sponginess because we became focused on living the life of the status quo. Unfortunately, it relegated us to accept things as they were or are, and thus accepting a life of mediocrity. We have greatness in us, but unfortunately, that's where for most people, it stayed. So we started to take facts at face value without discerning, digging deeper, without asking the right questions about ourselves and the world around us and the life that we wanted to live. And yes, even the problems that we were built to solve. We innately lost our ability to think critically as we once did as a child, unfortunately. There are so many characteristics and qualities of critical thinking that allows us to think and be like royalty, all of whom God has originally intended us to be and to become. And I'm here to tell you that God wants to build capacity in you so that you can upgrade your thoughts and acquire the necessary skills of critical thinking. So don't accept groupthink and settle for a life of average. I want you to break out of the status quo. How, you may ask? How do I do that? Well, I believe that if you listen to this message, you're going to get the answers because I break it down. In this message, Think for a Change, you are literally going to learn to think for a change. So let's just go ahead and get started. Hey everybody, welcome back. We're talking about thinking, and today I want to continue on with this new installment, Think for a Change. I believe this is a generation that will have a paradigm that is going to shift everything. It's going to shift how we live and how we do life on planet Earth. I believe that this is a generation that is going to experience one of the greatest paradigm shifts. And they're going to help us to change the way how we think, not necessarily always what we think, but how we think about what we think. This is a generation that will insist on learning how to think rather than what to think. This is a generation of thinkers. And today we want to talk to you again about how to think. How should we think? And how should we engage our mind to think even at a higher level or think more efficiently? The first way is you have to think critically. The big skill that everybody's talking about today is critical thinking. And I think that's one of the 24 skills for the 21st century, and that's critical thinking. In the book of Daniel, chapter 1, verse 17, straight to the end, I think it's verse 21, we read about Daniel, and I want to introduce you to Daniel, the critical thinker. As for the 4 children, God gave them knowledge and skill in all learning and wisdom. And so it's not just knowledge. It's just not absorbing things that people are teaching you and bringing it back to your memory. It was skills. It was applicable knowledge or knowledge that was transferable. And so as you think, you've got to ask yourself the question, is this not knowledge transferable? Because today, professions that we always thought would always be around are no longer around because they're being replaced with AI. And a lot of people are afraid of unemployment. The issue in the 21st century will not be an issue of unemployment. There are going to be more jobs that are going to be replacing the jobs that are going to be done away with, or they're going to be displaced because of AI. The issue is not unemployment. The issue is going to be employability. Do you have the skills to be employed? So in the days to come, you're going to see that there are going to be more jobs than the skills that are needed for those jobs. So if you're upgrading anything, it's not about getting a degree, it's about you getting the necessary skills to fill those jobs that are going to be flooding the workforce. But God gave him skills, knowledge, and skill in all learning. And so that means that those skills were transferable skills as well as wisdom. And wisdom is different from just acquisition of knowledge. It's about knowing how to use what you learn. And that's having that kind of acumen that's necessary to transfer or make the skills or knowledge that you acquire transferable. Secondly, the scripture says Daniel had understanding in all vision and dreams. So he was futuristic in his thoughts. He was an individual that not only understood trends and could track trends and mega trends, he was a trendsetter. Verse number 18 says, now at the end of the days that the king had said he should bring them in, then the prince of the eunuchs brought them in before Nebuchadnezzar. And the king communed with them, and among them all was found none like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Therefore stood they before the king, and in all matters of wisdom and understanding, that the king inquired of them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and the astrologers that were in all of his realm. And Daniel continued even unto the first year of King Cyrus. So it was not just about a degree that he had, because all the astrologers had degrees, magicians, they all went through the same university, the University of Babylon. So they all graduated with degrees, but what made him 10 times smarter and 10 times better than all of the astrologers, 10 times more intelligent, and he had 10 times more wisdom, was because he knew the art of thinking. And this is a skill that God gave him. In Daniel 9:20-24, it reads, and whilst I was speaking and praying and confessing my sin and the sin of my people Israel, and presenting my supplications before the Lord my God, for the holy mountain of my God. Yea, whiles I was speaking in prayer, even the man Gabriel, whom I had seen in visions at the beginning, being caused to fly swiftly, touched me about the time of the evening oblation. And he informed me and talked with me and said, O Daniel, I am now come forth to give thee skill and understanding. At the beginning of the supplications, the commandments came forth, and I'm come to show thee, for thou art greatly beloved, therefore understand the matters and consider the vision. And so God was able to download into Daniel's mind these amazing revelations and these amazing revelations and prognostications and prophetic words about the future, because he has had capacity. Critical thinking takes a certain capacity, and so does problem solving. And again, Jesus said, foxes have holes, the birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man have not where to lay his head. To lay his head doesn't mean that he wanted to find a bed. He wanted to have someone that had the capacity to receive his philosophies, his ideologies, to be open enough to see things differently, to see the new model that he was introducing. Like, he introduced a brand new model of worship called the church, a brand new model of government called the church. And he was downloading these amazing revelations and concepts, but most people had a context that was tied to an old model, an old way of thinking, old philosophies, and they would process it through those philosophies, and then they were restricted in their thinking. Jesus said in one of his parables, you can't put new wine in old wineskin, and it would destroy the wineskin and also waste the wine. And a lot of times when we do have revelation, the revelation is lost because of people's restricted thinking. If your context is wrong, your conclusion will be wrong. And so God is always looking for someone to download his revelations, to give instructions, to give strategies to. And I always wondered why it was that when it came to the building of the tabernacle, God had to use Bezalel and Aholiab. These were professionals. And And I always wondered why he couldn't download the revelation into the priest's heart. And then when I looked at the crises that Israel was in as a nation during the Persian rule in history, why it was that God had to download a revelation about the timing or divine timetable and take an attorney from out of his profession and instruct him to intercede and to fast, and then gave him a prophetic word for Esther. And I always wondered, where were the midwives? Where were the priests or prophets? Where were they? Why couldn't God use the priest? And then I often ask myself different questions about the Bible, even when it came to Israel breaking through the Jericho wall and possessing their possession. Why wasn't there someone within Israel as a nation to receive the downloads and the strategies and to protect the spies? And why did God have to go to a brothel, a hoe house? And excuse my language, but why did he have to go to Rahab's house? And why did he use Rahab? There was no other person in the city, nobody in government, nobody in politics. There was no socialist or educator that had the capacity. And these are the questions that I always ask myself as I'm studying the Bible. Why would God use a lawyer to give a prophetic word to Esther? And why would God have to use the judges and these businessmen, because Bezalel and Eliab were businessmen? And were there no priests that were there? Were there no Levites? And how were they thinking? And was their restrictions so small and so limited and so restricted that they didn't have capacity to receive downloads of strategies or prophetic occurrences or manifestations based on divine timetables? It reminds me of a parable that Jesus spoke, and it was the parable of the man that had this party, and he sent out these invitations, and he asked everybody to RSVP. And initially there were these 3 sets of people, and only 3 of them were invited. One had just got married, one was a businessman, one was a agriculturalist or farmist or a realtor. He was into real estate. We know that because he had property that he was managing. We know someone had just got married, so we know it was someone that kept contract or was loyal enough to keep their word or to embrace the contracts that they had established. And we know that we had these 3 categories of people, and all of them RSVP'd with regrets. Then he goes out into the city and he invites everyone in the city, and he said, yet there is still room. And then he goes out into the highways and hedges. So to me, when I analyzed that text, I concluded that 3 people combined had more capacity than an entire city and the regions around the city. Those 3 people had bandwidth, had intellectual bandwidth, that they got invited to consume an entire feast. And the Bible talks about God preparing a banqueting table before us. And I believe so many Christians are full on carnal candies that they can't eat the deep revelation of meat. And God wants to bring us into the time where we are not just sipping on milk relative to revelation and prophetic insight, that he gives us the capacity to meditate and ruminate and embrace more things. And it takes a lot of open-mindedness. You never have a person who thinks critically that is not open-minded. And usually people that are narrow-minded or restricted-minded or closed-minded, they are not critical thinking. So what is critical thinking? Critical thinking is the ability to think clearly and deeply about a problem and make a logical judgment for solving it. It is a kind of thinking where you consider all the scenarios and then you analyze it and you examine it and then you come up with an effective conclusion. So instead of believing on someone else's opinion, you begin to trust your own because you're open to consider all of the scenarios, and then you make the best decision based on wisdom. One of the things that critical thinking requires, it requires a lot of patience and a lot of observation. You have to be an observing individual, and you have to be someone that reads. You read even dissenting opinions, and you consider a dissenting opinion. Even if you're around the boardroom and you're the chair of the board of directors, for instance, all of us who are thinkers, we are usually very opinionated, and we are really usually convinced that how we think about something is the right way. But a critical thinker brings their ideas to the table and opens the table for a discussion. And after the discussion, looking not only at the opinions that support their position, but they look at dissenting opinions, opposite opinions, especially from someone who brings context and texture to why they arrive at a certain conclusion. There are some people who cannot engage in that kind of conversation because they're closed-minded. You might ask them, okay, why do you think that way? And they're not able to tell you how they came to that conclusion. A critical thinker is different. They're able to say, this is my conclusion, and this is how I arrived at this. So if you watch court cases, it's interesting because an attorney, as well as a judge, will take the same facts. And we have to learn that all facts is not truth. It's how you look at the facts, it's how you treat the facts, it's how you handle the facts. And you have the defense attorney, and then you have the prosecutor. You have both of them, and you have the judge. And of course, you have those that are sitting as jurors. And they're all hearing the same facts. But a skilled attorney, a skilled lawyer, learns how to take the law. And the law is made up of rules. And they learn how to take the same facts and they view it through, say, for instance, if you have murder and someone is up for murder and you've got mens rea and you've got res activis, I think it's called, mens rea and res activis. So one has to do with motive and intention. And they actually look at the murder case, and murder might have, say, 3 rules to it that determines whether a person is guilty or not. And what that attorney would do would take the facts and turn it like a prism. And then they'll use the lens of the first rule of that law, and they'll look at the rules, or they'll look at the facts to see if they fit this rule. But they'll take the same facts now, and they'll use a different rule. This is the same law, different rule. That rule becomes a lens, and then they'll look at the facts there. What happens with most people is this, that they don't know the art of critical thinking, where you turn facts, and I want to emphasize, facts is not truth. And you turn those facts around like a prism, and you look at all sides of it before you come to a conclusion. It's Solomon. Solomon had 2 women that came to him, and they both said, this is my baby. And critical thinking, Solomon came up with this idea, and the idea determined the correct mother. And he wasn't just looking at facts. What he did was he raised a question. So a critical thinker is not always looking for answers. They are looking for the right questions to find the right answers. And the scripture says, ask and it shall be given you. And in this season, Finding the right questions and articulating the right questions is more important than discovering the right answers. Because if you have the right questions, you will get the right answers. So the issue is never with answers. The issue is the right questions so that you can find the right answers. And that's what critical thinking is all about. It's an important skill to learn. It's going to help you to implement innovative ideas. And if there's ever a time we need creativity and innovation, it is during this generation. It helps you to understand the connection and the logical connection and the rational connection, not just logical, but the rational connection between two things that seemingly are unrelated and seemingly disconnected or may have no relevance to an issue or problem that you're trying to address. So this is all critical thinking is. Critical thinking allows you to listen to someone's opinion or statements that people are making and discern intent and discern motive and discern propaganda and discern conspiracy theories. And you're able to listen with a different kind of ear before you come to your conclusion. And, over the last year and a half, there's been so many conspiracy theories and so many quote unquote experts that are making these statements, and you can shoot holes right in the statements. And unless you have the ability of critical thinking, then you're going to be controlled. You're going to be controlled by the kingdom of darkness, because people take most things at face value. You're able to discern deception. You're able to inform yourself. You're able to take a stand. You're able to speak up. You're able to show up with integrity. You're able to show up as a thought leader. And that takes critical thinking. Critical thinkers don't follow their emotions, or they are not subject to whims of emotion. They use a kind of higher cognitive skill of reasoning, which includes logic, reason, judgment, logical thoughts, rationality, and wisdom. Why is that all important? Let me give you scripture. Colossians 3:1. If you then be risen with Christ, seek those things which are above. You got to be able to elevate your thinking. You got to think at a higher level, where Christ sitteth at the right hand of God. Again, we established earlier that when Adam fell, he fell into a realm that he was not wired to live in. He was not wired to live in a realm that is driven by information. He was wired to live in a realm driven by revelation. He was not wired to live in a realm that was driven by facts. He was wired to live in a realm that was driven by faith. He was not wired to live in a world of oppression where people thought for you. He was wired to live in a world of freedom and liberty, where he was free to try things out and mix things together and analyze and postulate and to create and come up with new ideas. And this is very, very important, especially those of you that are in the performing arts or the area of culture. You write music, you produce film, you sing songs, you write plays. The whole idea of critical thinking is tantamount to creativity and originality. You cannot have originality without critical thinking. And what we have today, unfortunately, what we call art, what we call great performances, I think it's great deception, because it lacks creativity. And if you are mimicking something that someone else did, that's not creativity. And it's fine to use artists and their performances, whether they're actors, whether they're fine artists, dancers. It's great to be inspired by these great performers and artists and actors, but you've got to be able to put a spin on your own. You've got to give your own take of something, and you've got to come up with something that is original. And again, you don't want to think outside of the box. You want to create new boxes that other things outside of. And, I'm thinking of Mozart. What happened was, in his career, he started to go deaf. And some of his greatest pieces was created when he started turning deaf. And why was that? And in his own words, he said that he really couldn't hear the music that was playing around him because he couldn't hear at a distance. So he had to learn the art of hearing from his inner ear. And this is an inside job. And a lot of people judge their own ideas and they second guess themselves. And you will never know how creative and innovative you are until you try it. So what if it blows up in your face while you discovered a way not to do something? And this is how the light bulb was created 1,000 times, 999 times, and on the 1,000 times he was successful. And they interviewed him, weren't you discouraged? Didn't you want to give up? He said, no, I just discovered 999 ways not to create the light bulb. And a critical thinker is just like that. They're going to mix things together. Some things are going to blow up and they say, okay, this didn't work. I'm going to try something else. But everything they do could be considered a success because they're driven by a desire to bring something new to this world, something that would advance the world, something that would make this world a better place, something that would help us to live better, see better, do better, and help us to progress as human beings. And so when we talk about critical thinking, there's the scripture that says, unless you become as a little child, you shall not enter into the kingdom. And, the object lesson was a child, and you ask a question. You say, well, what makes a child a child? And obviously it's their curiosity. It's their adventure. It's their cognitive flexibility and their cognitive sponginess. They're like sponges. They absorb. You see them playing with their imagination, and they even have a healthy dose of skepticism. So you could say, don't do that because, and I'm an adult and I know, but they have a little bit of reservation and skepticism, and they say, well, let me try it. And so you say, don't touch the stove because the stove is hot, and they're skeptic and they go touch the stove. And didn't I tell you why? Because they have enough sponginess and flexibility, and they have just enough skepticism where they ask, well, what if? What if they're wrong? I mean, they learn by touching and tasting and all of that, but they keep that what if going, and then they have a healthy dose of humility. They're going to try, and if they don't succeed, they know where to find help. But at first, they want to do it. And those of you that had a 1-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 3-year-old, you want to put their clothes on, and they want to do it. I do it. So they end up with, the left foot on the right, the left shoe on the right foot, and the right shoe on the left foot, and the clothes messed up. And they want to try it. They want to do it. But we've lost that. We don't want to try things because we're afraid of failing. But that's how children are. I have a niece that lives in London, and they were coming through, going back to Bermuda, and they stopped at my house. And the baby was little, and her mother was saying, oh, Zaya is getting ready to walk, but she hasn't walked as yet. And in my house, Zaya took her first walk. However, her first steps. However, we were in the kitchen and it was so funny. She was trying to pick herself up and her legs were wide open, and you could tell that she was not going to get steady because her legs were too wide open, and she would fall down and she would pick herself back up, and I'd say, put your legs a little closer. She'll put her legs a little closer, and she couldn't get her balance, and she'd fall down and get up and fall down. And then right before my eyes, I watched this little girl who had fallen and gave herself a hand clap. She was clapping because she fell, and she picked herself back up, gave herself a clap because she was standing up on her feet. And I think that we don't celebrate those small steps that we take to that big idea, that big breakthrough. We don't stop and celebrate. We may not be where we want to be, but we're on our way. The journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step, and the second, and the third, and the fourth. And so as you're developing your ability to think critically, you start with the small things. Start with watching a movie and analyzing the movie. Start with a problem in the workplace and analyze that problem. Start with an argument that you might have had with your husband or your wife, and use that as a case study. Everything for me is a case study. I have a COO, and I call her Pharaoh. I'm not going to tell you her name, and because I don't do things like that. I would never tell you her name was Lisa Johnson. I would not tell you that. But she's one of the most brilliant critical thinkers that I've ever met. And she has this uncanny way of connecting dots very quickly. She's a big picture person and a small picture person. Usually you have big picture people and you have small picture people. Very seldom do you have a person that has big picture and small pictures that are able to connect the dots. And what I do with her in order to arrive at a conversation, we have many conversations, and I always invite a different opinion than mine. I'm extremely opinionated. I believe what I think we should do is always right. However, I'm open enough to hear other people's opinions, because at the end of the day, if I make a decision based on someone's opinion, I'm still responsible. Why? Because I asked for their opinion, so I could never blame my staff for something. Why? I made a decision to hire them. So the onus is on me, always on me. But in talking with her as COO, and I've trusted over the years, I've learned how to trust her opinion because of the results that her opinion gets. But it's never, ever before we have a long dialogue. And it's never before I give my opinion. Never, ever. I've never made a decision based on someone else's opinion. And if a person gives me their opinion, they got to convince me that their opinion is more efficient or effective than mine. I'm going to ask for rationale. Give me your rationale. And if a person has not thought through why I need to do something, usually I'm going to park it aside. I'm never going to say that, okay, this opinion or this suggestion is never going to work. I never do that. I just want to know that when I make a decision, touch once. I only handle things once. I don't want to go back the second and the third and the fifth time. Is this the right thing for us to do? Is this connected to a vision? Or is this a good thing to do? And a lot of times you have people that have good ideas or even great ideas, but they don't have excellent ideas. And if you want to push people into excellence, it's hard, especially if it's good or great. And so one of the things that I do with her, because she's one of the decision makers, is we look at case studies. And this is a longer way to make a decision. And a lot of people don't engage in that kind of intellectual conversation or dialogue. And we often miss great inspirational, great innovative ideas, especially if you are a critical thinker. I'm a critical thinker. So having people around you who are able to get involved in the process, because usually it's a long process and it can be frustrating to people who are usually not invited around the decision-making table. And if you are working for Fortune 500 companies, 9 times out of 10, the average employee is never invited around the table. You are told what to do. You are given a job description and you do exactly what you're told to do, and nobody's asking you for your opinion. Nobody. So you really don't get involved in that high-level thought process that goes on every single day in Fortune 500 companies. Every single day, they are tweaking something. Every single day, they are pushing the envelope. This is why when you have certain software, If you stay on Google long enough or whoever long enough, if you buy anybody's software, they always have upgrades, always, every day. One of the softwares that I have that I'm using is a research software. Every single day they're upgrading. They're tweaking this and tweaking that. The question is, when was the last time as a Christian you've upgraded your thoughts? When was the last time your thoughts were stretched where you say, okay, I was thinking this way, and it may be age appropriate, it may be stage appropriate, but it may not be the best because it may still be an influence of other people's thoughts and influenced by culture. So when was the last time you had an upgrade in your thinking, where someone challenged you and you were open enough to say, okay, there's more than one way to skin a cat? And this is how critical thinkers are. They think, well, there's more than one way to skin a cat, and they're always open. They ask people for their perspectives so that they can have almost like a 360 at dealing with ways to meet a need, solve a problem, or ways to innovate. They have a 360 perspective. It reminds me of a movie, and if you want to know more about how to develop your critical thinking, there's this movie called Vantage Point. I watched this movie, and the first 30 minutes I was bored out of my skull because they went to this person and they talked about this, and all the facts were pointing to one person, sort of assassinating the president. But at the end of the movie, I'm not going to expose the whole movie. I saw it with my own eyes, along with everybody else. I saw it happen. It was on the screen, and everybody that was telling the facts told the facts and made the same conclusion that I made, only to find out that facts are not truth. A critical thinker excavates. They dig down, they dig deep, they take nothing for face value. And it's, to me, when Jesus taught his disciples, it was like giving them a PhD in kingdom living. That's what it was like. After 3 years, they had a PhD in kingdom living. And guess what? They still, after they graduated, summa cum laude, and Jesus only had one dropout, Judas, but the rest had graduated. Once they graduated, I call it from Kingdom School of Ministry, and Jesus had the first Kingdom School of Ministry. Then they were charged to go into all the world and preach the gospel. First in Judea, then in Samaria, and then into the uttermost parts of the world. In other words, they were going to take this wisdom and they were going to be problem solvers and gap fillers and history makers. Luke 18:17 says, "Verily I say unto you, whosoever shall not receive the kingdom of God as a child or as a little child shall in no wise enter therein." So when you have the whole idea of critical thinking, you maintain the sponginess in your cognitive faculty. You maintain that sponginess, and you always say, okay, there's more than one way to skin a cat. So that's the first way of thinking. The second way of thinking is called complex problem solving. So it's not simple problem solving like learning how to tie a shoe or learning how to cook. It's more complex than this. It's life and death issues. And I remember Operation Desert Storm. Many of you remember Operation Desert Storm. They were in the war room, and I think it was Colin Powell, or one of them was in the war room, and I'm probably getting my history all wrong, but the general was in the war room, and after they had been in the war room, they made some decisions, and those decisions happened to be right. But in the war room, it was a matter of life and death. And so your mind is your war room. And this is where you're going to fight all your battles, all the battles that you will ever fight. Economic battles, social battles, relational battles, any struggle, any area of your struggle, you're going to fight it here. This is your war room. And you have to have complex problem solving, because problems are not just single. It's not just unilaterally connected. It's multiplex. And you have to take a complex problem and make it simple, or you make it simplex. So you don't extrapolate the complexity of it, but you break the problem down into bite-sized pieces until the answer becomes simple for you. And this is the way that you find solutions to complex problems. And complex problems require critical thinking. And this is how you become a problem solver. Because in looking at the state of affairs in this world and the kinds of complex problems, which we call systemic. So if the problem is systemic, it simply means that you just can't rip it apart, because everything would start crumbling. But you've got to pull pieces apart, and you've got to be able to say, okay, what is the root of this? And sometimes most people think surface. This is the problem. But it goes deeper and greater. Like in the United States of America, we talk about problems and we talk about them so simple, but they're really, really complex. Like, say, for instance, people talk about, well, there's so much problems in the United States of America and the system is wrong. But then you have to ask, well, what if the system actually was built to operate that way? So the problem may not be that you have a system that's the problem. You just have a wrong system. And if you have a wrong system, then what is the system that we want? And you cannot make a change into something if nothing is there. So if you keep wanting, okay, we gotta change America, we gotta change the educational system, we've gotta change the medical system, and all of that is true, but what do we change into? So we need architects, and we need people who can build alternative models and test the alternative model and then bring those to the table. And I'm talking to believers. I'm talking to us, because there are a lot of people in this world doing a lot of good in this world. And so much resources is being thrown at problems, and you wonder what is taking so long. And I always say, yes, there are a lot of problem solvers in the world, but we need more hands on deck. And maybe your piece is what we need to add to this new model. Maybe your cog that you're holding goes in this new machinery, and maybe that's what's missing. And so you should never feel as if when you address a problem that what you bring to the table is too insignificant or too small. It was the rivets that tore open like a zipper that made the Titanic sink. When you think about it, in Saturday Night Live, they had this funny little skit. And they were interviewing the iceberg. And the iceberg said, you know, I get all the bad rap, but I've always been here. I never mess with anyone. I was minding my business, and the Titanic decided to run itself into me. And I should be suing the Titanic, and the Titanic should be getting the bad rap. But why do I have to get the bad rap when it wasn't me? When you think about the Titanic, and they did some research on why did it split, because this would be the boat that was unsinkable. It was around that time that the Titanic was being built. All of America was being built, so everybody needed steel. They needed the steel. And at that time, they were looking for steel rivets, the rivets that they seal the parts of the boat with. They were looking for those steel rivets. And they could find most of the steel rivets, but they ran out, and the Titanic had a timeline that they wanted to have their maiden voyage. And so one of the engineers or the architects, I don't know what you call those that build boats, but one of the architects of the boat, and one of those that were responsible for constructing it, they ran out of these rivets. They had steel everywhere else. But in this place, this is what they said. They said, since we can't find them and we're on a deadline, just bring me any, because no one will know and no one will see. And this is how people think. Nobody's going to know. And how are they going to know? Nobody's going to know. But we do know. It's those rivets that are there. And some of them are inferior and some of them are rusting. So instead of using the steel rivets, they use some other kind of alloy rivet. And when they hit the iceberg, the boat should have survived. But guess where it tore? It tore right where they substitute the steel rivet for these alloy rivets. And where it was, it just ripped right open like a zipper. A lot of times what God is doing, he's trying to build our intellectual capacity. But some of us have compromised. It don't take all of that. We don't need to do all of that. All of this protocol and all of this revising and upgrading your thinking and decreeing and declaring and reading the Bible, it don't take all of that, but it does. One of the things that Albert Einstein said, finding solutions to complex problems requires critical thinking. And he said, we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. It's going to be like pouring new wine in old wineskin. And so when you read the book of Exodus 36, we have a problem that is presented. Moses has been charged by God and given an assignment to build this tabernacle. And that was his assignment. But he has a problem. Why? Because he doesn't know how to build it. So he has this blueprint, and God gives him the architectural rendition of what he has to build. He doesn't know what to do with it. So he goes into industry. He finds Bezalel and Eliab, and this is how he describes them. Then wrought Bezalel and Eliab and every wise-hearted man in whom the Lord had put wisdom and understanding, to know how to work all manner of work for the service of the sanctuary, according to all that the Lord had commanded. And Moses called Bezalel and Aholiab and every wise-hearted man in whose heart the Lord had put wisdom. He put it there. It wasn't always there. He built capacity in them. And everyone whose heart stirred him up to come into to do the work of the Lord. And this is interesting when I read it, because when you go back and you peel it all the way back, it talks about how they actually was given by God the wisdom and the understanding to work in all kinds of, I guess you would call that metallurgy. They became these metallurgists because there was a problem, and then they allowed God to download into their minds how to do what they need to do to solve the problem, because they learned how to think at that level. So when you have the whole idea of critical thinking is the ability to also engage in problem-solving activities in order to find the solution for complex problems. So when you deal with data or big data, or the world of big data, so when you deal with the world of big data and when you deal with AI, artificial intelligence, computers are getting smarter and smarter than human beings, and everyone is running around and they're believing, okay, AI is going to replace us. AI has the ability maybe to process faster, but what AI cannot do It cannot create the future. What it does is it looks at everything in the past, and AI then takes all the information from the past, brings it together, and it can prognosticate the future, but it cannot prophesy the future, and it cannot create the future. The only the only entity in the earth that can create future, it is not AI. AI needs the past, but people do not need the past to create the future. What do they need? They need to think beyond the present, and they need to project themselves in the future and use their creative skills in order to create the future that they want. AI cannot look ahead and come back to humanity and say, I see this in the future. But a human being can. A human being has something that AI can never have, and thus AI should not be looked at as the enemy. AI should be looked at as something that augments what you do, but it can never replace what you do. And therefore, nobody should be afraid of artificial intelligence, because AI can never, ever replace a human being. Number 3, let me get through this really quickly. You've got to think possibility thinking. And this is the art of thinking big. And Genesis 11:6, and the Lord said, behold, the people is one, and they have all one language, and this they began to do, and nothing will be restrained from them which they have imagined to do. So thinking big is the art of imagination. It's harnessing the faculty of imagination and trusting yourself that on your best day, you can never come up with that idea. So that idea had to come from God. And if it comes from God, with God, all things are possible. So whatever you're currently thinking about doing, whatever you're currently thinking about being, whatever you're currently thinking about acquiring, think bigger. It's already too small. Pray the prayer of Jabez. Ask God to enlarge your intellectual territory. Nothing great happens with small thinking. So you've got to be able to refuse to settle for good enough and average. To be average is to settle for a life determined by external forces, and that's the average person. To be average means you are happy to be like everyone else, living beneath your privileges and performing beneath your potential. You are born to be great. You have greatness in you. Greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world. You were born again to be greater. And we have to understand this, that you are wired for greatness. The opposite of greatness isn't failure. The opposite of greatness is mediocrity. And that's where the average person settles, right there. It's good enough. And the enemy of great is good. And people settle for good. This is good enough. I'm living a good life. But God has a greater life for you. It's settling for living living on little and living a life of average, because you refuse to challenge yourself to reach beyond the threshold of comfortable and familiar. It is choosing to live amongst the clutter of the common, so that you don't stick out amongst your friends and amongst your family for fear of being misjudged and misunderstood. It's knowing you have it in you, but you lack the courage to step out by faith or go out on a limb, because you might fall, or someone might say that you failed, and you're afraid of people's opinion. So you settle for being average so you can avoid the pain of being misjudged or even ridiculed for trying. Some people have mistaken average for being humble or being content. You got to be content with what you got, but it's not. It's failing to recognize that God created you in his image and then required you to believe that you're his representative. And most people don't, because they fear being called arrogant or accused of thinking more highly of themselves than they ought. But the Bible said, it doesn't say that you shouldn't think highly of yourself. The Bible says don't think more highly of yourself than you ought. So you should think highly of yourself. And a lot of times people confuse confidence with arrogance. And usually when a confident person shows up, people want to beat them back into submission. This is not anyone that we can control. When you start thinking for yourself, people cannot control you, and you will ditch the average mindset. To have an average mentality really is to resign yourself to live a life of unreached potential. You aren't an underachiever. You're an overcomer. You're capable of achieving so much more. So that means that whatever you focus on and whatever you truly desire, be it a vision, a dream, or a goal, you can do it. Just get rid of your average mindset. Wake up every morning and make an attempt and make a commitment and make an intention that you are going to outdo your performance of yesterday. Every day, I'm going to outdo my performance from yesterday. So the kingdom of heaven is made up of the extraordinary. And because you live in the kingdom of heaven, you are extraordinary. You're not an ordinary citizen. You're an extraordinary citizen. So don't settle for average. Get rid of your average mindset, because an average mindset is the most destructive type of mentality to have, because it accepts it is accepted by a culture that will never challenge you to expand your horizon. They will never challenge you to think outside of the box. They will never challenge you to break out of the mediocre state. Why? Because they can control you as long as you're in that state. So the status quo is popular because it doesn't require any discipline. It doesn't require anyone thinking outside of the box, creativity. And a lot of times, if you stay in that kind of environment, your brilliance will be assassinated at point blank range by ignorance. And I'm going to say it again. Your brilliance will be assassinated at point blank range by ignorance. So what I want you to do is to get out of the bleachers, play full out, remove your lids, remove your limitations. Your future is filled with unlimited potentiality and possibility, and you've got to be able to think big. The next thing is, how do you think? You're going to think like royalty, because you're the child of the Most High God. And so I say to people, look, right now you might be in between blessings, but learn how to live like royalty. Just learn how to live like royalty. So I encourage people, look, even if you are living in a rundown house with the water leaking and rats and roaches running around your house, it's cool, because that's just a step towards something greater. What I want you to do is to go out, get used one piece of slab of marble. So you just go to the marble store. So you want, tell them that you want some marble samples. Get one of those marble samples, put it at your front door. Because what you're going to do, you're going to begin to train your mind to think extravagance. And you're going to train your mind to begin to plot your future along the lines of what you focus on. So when you go out your house, the Bible said you're blessed going out, blessed coming in. So put a piece of marble on the floor and your mind will go to the rest. Write your visions, where you want to go, put your vision board up, and you will be surprised of what will happen for you. I want you to think like royalty, act like royalty, walk like royalty, eat like royalty, dress like royalty, and eventually you'll begin to be treated like royalty, and then you'll rule like royalty. And it all starts in your mind. Thanks for joining us today. Don't forget to tune in next week for part 2 of Think for a Change. You're going to be blessed. We pray that God spoke to you through this message and that you are able to take it and apply it in your life. Please go ahead and comment in the chat and let us know what God spoke to you in your heart and what you took away from the message. You know how I love to do life with you. Subscribe to the channel, hit that bell, stay up to date with the notifications of when we have new videos and when we go live. I want you to know that there is a place for you right here at Trimm Ministries. For more information, head straight over to cindytrimmministries.org. You can find all the information on how to give, how to get involved, and you can also join us live each and every week. So thanks again for being a part of this family. We continue to wait to see how God continues to work in you and through your life right where you are. And don't forget, if you're ever in need of prayer, send us a prayer request. We'll be more than happy to join our faith with yours. God bless.
The Cindy Trimm Ministries app just got even better. Dive into the brand new experience right now by updating or downloading the latest version of the app for free in the Apple or Google Play Store. The dynamic home screen keeps you up to date with the latest empowering articles, sermons, live streaming services, and a weekly arrangement of the most inspiring content available anywhere. Watch on-demand messages and begin leading your empowered life group today. Sign up now and receive your how-to handbook and discussion guides for each message. There's more empowerment at every click. Engage in the latest events hosted by Dr. Trimm and find out when she's coming to a city near you. We've even made giving easier than ever before. You can donate now by selecting the Give button inside of the app. After creating your profile, giving will be as simple as putting in an amount and selecting Donate.
The window opener for witty ideas and creative inventions, that which protects you, your offering, and your seed, is a spiritual currency called the tithe. The tithe will secure the blessings for not only yourself, but your children and your children's children. It is important that you tithe. It's only a dime for every dollar, and when you tithe, God obligates himself to bless you. The tithe is a discipline that you should adopt. So lean in as we discover the mystery of the tithe. Welcome to our next installment. I want you to jump right into our text from out of the book of Genesis. And I really want to shape your paradigm around the whole idea of tithe and give you another understanding and just turn it like a prism so that you can really see the benefits of tithing. I know it's a big debate whether or not tithing was a part of the dispensation of law, but now that we're under the dispensation of grace, we shouldn't be tithing. Prayerfully, this particular installment would help to clarify many of the questions that are floating around today in the church. Genesis 14:17-24. And the king of Sodom went out to meet him after his return from the slaughter of Chedorlaomer, and of the kings that were with him at the valley of Sheva, which is the king's dale. And Melchizedek, king of Salem, bore forth bread and wine, and he was the priest of the Most High God. And he blessed him and said, Blessed be Abram of the Most High God, possessor of heaven and earth, and blessed be the Most High God, which has delivered thine enemies into thine hand. And he gave him tithes of all. And the king of Sodom said unto Abram, Give me the persons, take the goods to themselves. And Abram said to the king of Sodom, I have lifted up my hand unto the Lord, the Most High God, the possessor of heaven and earth, that I will not take from a thread even to a shoelace, that I will not take anything that is thine, lest thou should say, I have made Abram rich, save only that which the young man have eaten, and the portion of the man which went with me, Aner, Ashkel, Mamar, let them take their portion. So the whole idea of tithing, and again, this is a concept that has been floating around in the church, and it's open for big debate. And I'm just weighing in, just giving scriptures so that you can understand, at least from my perspective and my ideology, why the tithe is still important and why the tithe is relevant. You can consider the tithe like a tax. A tax is used to keep a country in good repair to pay for schools, education, infrastructure, libraries, things like that. The tithe was not instituted in the dispensation of law, but in the dispensation of human consciousness, which was way ahead of the dispensation of promise, which is the dispensation that Abraham paid tithes. And so if you go back all the way to the book of Genesis, actually the fourth chapter of Genesis 3-7, you would be introduced when the tithe was actually instituted. And it was obviously by revelation at that particular time, even though Cain and Abel had been banned from out of the Garden of Eden, yet they raised their children based on a revelation that they had received, obviously, as a direct download from heaven, them actually talking with God, God communing with them, and then, Adam and Eve actually teaching their two sons, Cain and Abel. In Genesis 4:3-7, it says, in the process of time, it came to pass that Cain brought of the fruit of the ground an offering unto the Lord. So that's the offering. And Abel, he also brought the firstlings of his flock and of the fat. And the Lord had respect to Abel's offering. So this is interesting because he brought the firstling, which is the first fruit, and then of the fat, that was the tithe. So he gave an offering, he gave his first fruit, and he gave his tithe. And as a result of that, he had favor, God increased his influence, etc., etc. Hebrews 7:1 records the whole tithing concept and takes us all the way back to Abraham, who had paid tithe to a king or the priest of the Most High God, which was Melchizedek. So in Hebrews chapter 7, we're introduced to the story and they expand the story. It says, for this Melchizedek, king of Salem, priest of the Most High God, who met Abram returning from the slaughter of kings and blessed him, to whom also Abraham gave a tenth part of all, first being by interpretation king of righteousness, and after that king of Salem, which is king of peace, without father, without mother, without descent, having neither beginning of days nor end of days, but made it like unto the Son of God, abideth the priest continuously. Now consider how great this man was, unto whom even the patriarch Abraham gave a tenth of the spoils. And verily, they that are of the sons of Levi, who receive the office of the priesthood, have a commandment to take tithes of the people according to the law, that is, of their brethren, though they came out of the loins of Abraham. So a tithe, which was given in Genesis chapter 4 as a revelation, repeated in the dispensation, and this is this dispensation of human consciousness, repeated in the dispensation of promise, that revelation is carried on in the dispensation of law. So from the beginning of mankind's relationship with God and the beginning of mankind's operation here in the earth realm, men have been paying tithe. And this is from generation to generation to generation and dispensation to dispensation to dispensation. And if a tithe paying was by revelation at the beginning of the consciousness of what God wants and how to worship God and what would honor God, why would you think that particular observance would end in the dispensation of grace? I want to drop down to verse number 9. And as I may so say, Levi also, who receiveth tithe, paid tithes in Abraham. And so Abraham's act is passed down from one generation to the other. And as a result of that, Levi, or the Levitical priesthood, was blessed to receive the tithe, or were beneficiaries of the tithe that was paid by Abraham. And so, you see it passed down. Abraham has two children, and then, of course, Isaac has a set of twins, and then Jacob has 12 children, and one of them is Levi. So you see this intergenerational blessing that is being sent down as a result of paying tithe. So let's see if we can bring some understanding and comprehension to the particular discipline of paying tithes. And it's a benefit. So the tithe becomes a kingdom currency, or your kingdom capital, that can be easily converted into wealth. So the tithe is a dime on every dollar. You keep 90 cents and give God a dime. So it doesn't seem so bad when you're dealing with just a dollar. So a tithe is only a dime. It's a dime on every dollar. That's what a tithe is. And it's no more than that. It's a dime on every dollar. And the tithe was given to God through the priesthood. Thus, the tithe belongs to God. So you're not giving God what does not belong to him. You are giving God what already belongs to him. Since God owns everything in the earth, everything belongs to him. Therefore, when you pay the tithe, you're considered a good steward. Psalm 24:1 says that the earth belongs to the Lord and the fullness thereof, and they that dwell therein. So when you don't give your tithe, you are considered a spiritual robber or an extortionist, because you're actually stealing from God. And this is important to understand. When we read the scripture from out of Malachi chapter 3, verse 7-8, it says, even from the days of your fathers, you're gone away from my ordinances and have not kept them. Return unto me, and I will return unto you, saith the Lord. But you said, wherein shall we return? Will a man rob God? Yet you have robbed me. But you say, wherein have we robbed thee? In tithes and offering. So technically speaking, you are robbing God of the opportunity to bless your life and robbing God of the opportunity to protect your life. Technically, God doesn't need your money because he owns everything. This is just a way that you honor God. This is a way that you acknowledge everything belongs to him and that I'm a mere steward. The tithe is a window opener. And so a window is a portal. When windows are open, it's different from a door being open. A door is an opportunity that opens, but when a door of opportunity that opens to you, but a window is the receptivity or the receiving of supernatural ideas and witty inventions. So when a window is open to you, God will inspire you for greatness, for success, and for prosperity. Malachi 3:8-11, will a man rob God? Yet you have robbed me. But you say, wherein have we robbed thee? In tithe and offering. So when you give your tithe, when you give your offering, it gives God an opportunity to prove his benevolence in your life. And when you withhold your tithe, you rob him of that right. And the world will look at you and wonder, is God really this provider? Can he really sustain his children? And so the spirit realm works by the law of prosperity. You are a blessing that there shall not be room enough to receive. So if you're receiving a blessing and there's not room in your life, there's going to be an overflow of blessings, an overflow that will, bless your family, bless your community, bless the nation. So the tithe, number 5, protects the seed and passes blessings down to future generation. So when we talk about protecting the seed, we did a whole segment on the seed. You want to see the seed as something you plant like in a field. So the tithe will be equivalent to a scarecrow. And the scarecrow is there so that the crows and the birds won't eat up the seed before it gets a chance to blossom and bring forth the harvest. And so that's what your tithe does. Your tithe protects the seed. Number 7, you should tithe on all your income. That includes monetary gifts, bonuses, rental income. You should tithe on everything. The Bible said that we should tithe in all of our increase. And there is a penalty for not paying your tithe. There's a penalty of 20%. So this is number 6 and 7. There is a 20% penalty for touching the tithe. And then number 7, we should give a tithe of all income. That includes monetary gifts, bonuses, rental income. So if you have a rental property and you're renting it out, you should be tithing off of that. If you get bonuses and tips and birthday gifts, you should be tithing off of that. You should give a tithe off of all your increases. Leviticus 27 and 30. And all the tithe of the land, whether of the seed of the land or the fruit of the tree, is the Lord's. It is holy unto the Lord. So your property is on land. And if you have property that you're leasing out, then a tenth of that belongs to the Lord. Number 8, we should covenant to pay our tithes to God. Genesis 28:22. And Jacob awakened out of his sleep, and he said, surely the Lord is in this place, and I knew it not. And he was afraid and said, how dreadful is this place? This is none other but the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. And Jacob rose up early in the morning, took the stone that he had put for a pillow, and set it up for a pillar, and poured oil upon the top of it. And he called the name of that place Bethel. But the name of the city was called Luz at first. And Jacob vowed a vow, saying, if God will be with me and will keep me in this way that I go, I will give me bread to eat and raiment to put on, so that I come again to my father's house in peace. Then shall the Lord be my God, and this stone which I have set for a pillar shall be God's house. And of all that thou shalt give me, I surely will give a tenth unto thee. And I love this because Jacob recognizes the power of the tithe. And at that particular time, he really did not have enough resources even to tithe to God. He said, God, if you bless me, I promise you I would tithe out of that. And I thought that was really, really powerful, because if you read Jacob's story, Jacob goes on, he's employed, then he starts his own business. He ends up in biotech business, and he's a millionaire multiple times over. And then we see that his national and global personal brand begins to increase. He becomes an influencer, and then he raises his sons really to be industry leaders. And through just his life, we see how the Hebrew nation becomes really powerful. The tithe supports the budget of the church. Again, when you bring your tithe, your church has a budget, and it helps to support that budget. Malachi 3:7 and 10, the Bible said, bring all the tithes into my house, and prove me now herewith that I would not open the windows of heaven, pour you out a blessing, that there shall be not room enough to receive it. The next one, the tithe. The tithe was given to support those in full-time ministry service in the house of God. So the priests were not paid a salary. They were salaried out of the tithe. So as long as there was tithe, the priest could eat and live. Numbers 18:20 to 28. Again, they were sustained based on the tithe. Now, the danger of touching the tithe. 1, you end up under a financial curse. Malachi 3:8 to 12. You can look at that. It says, will a man rob God? Yet you have robbed me. But you say, wherein we have robbed thee in tithes and offering. You are cursed with a curse, for you have robbed me. And so being cursed means it's different from like someone with a cauldron, a black cat, bubble, bubble, toil and trouble, bam, and you have this curse. It has nothing to do with that. It simply means God sets up these laws and ordinances, and he expects you to keep those laws and to keep those ordinances. And when you do, you end up being blessed. The opposite of a bless is a curse. You can read this in the book of Deuteronomy chapter 28, and you can see all the blessings up to verse number 14, but verse number 15 to the very ending of that particular chapter, there are all these curses, and the curses come as the natural result of acts of disobedience. So when we talk about blessings and curses, you actually curse yourself, and you also bless yourself by choosing and being intentional with the Word of God, applying it to your life, being obedient to what God says, as opposed to being disobedient to what He says, and then the natural outcome of that will be a curse. We see this in the book of Joshua, chapter 1, Joshua chapter 7, verse 1, straight through to verse number 25. You see how Achan touched the holy thing which belonged to God. His family was cursed. The earth opened its mouth, and we see his name blotted out of history. And that was because of what he did with touching that which belonged to God. Now, there is a residual effect of tithing. And I read it early in Hebrews chapter 7. You could read it for yourself. Hebrews 7, verses 1 to 10, Melchizedek. And then it goes on and talks about how Levi paid tithes in his father. And as a result of that, the tithe were paid to him. So he was really blessed as a result of his father paying tithes. So the tithe is not just to secure blessings in your life. The tithe is there so that you can secure blessings in your children's and your children's children. We talk about, staying married for the children's sake, but tithe for the children's sake. Way after you pass, the benefits of the tithe will continue to reverberate throughout generations that are yet unborn to time, and maybe parts of your lineage that you may never get a chance to see, they will be blessed as a result of that. So the question is, if the windows of heaven can be open, how do you actually open the windows of heaven? You do it with your tithe, and you do it with your offering. Malachi 3, 1 to 10. Again, an open door are opportunities, and open windows are God downloading witty ideas, creative inventions into your mind that affects your bottom line, which is your finances. And so when it comes to the tithe belongs to God. It was instituted way before the dispensation of promise, way before the dispensation of law. And it is a discipline that you should adopt if you are paying giving seeds, giving offering. Your tithe actually protects that, and it guarantees you success and protection in the long run. It's only a dime on a dollar, and that's the mystery of the tithe. Thanks for tuning in to the series on Cindy Trimm YouTube channel. All of our activities at Cindy Trimm Ministries are supported by our wonderful partners, sponsors, and contributors. And if you'd like to become one, you can do so by adhering to the following commercial. In the meantime, please take just a second to click the subscribe button. That way you won't miss a single life-changing video. And if you have subscribed, make sure you share. Thanks again for watching. And as always, it's a pleasure and an honor to do life with you in real time.
The Cindy Trimm Ministries app just got even better. Dive into the brand new experience right now by updating or downloading the latest version of the app for free in the Apple or Google Play Store. The dynamic home screen keeps you up to date with the latest empowering articles, sermons, live streaming services, and a weekly arrangement of the most inspiring content available anywhere. Watch on-demand messages and begin leading your empowered life group today. Sign up now and receive your how-to handbook and discussion guides for each message. There's more empowerment at every click. Engage in the latest events hosted by Dr. Trimm and find out when she's coming to a city near you. We've even made giving easier than ever before. You can donate now by selecting the Give button inside of the app. After creating your profile, giving will be as simple as putting in an amount and selecting Donate. Download the Cindy Trimm Ministries app now and begin your journey of empowerment with us today.